So welcome everybody to another Grip-Birkman Coaches Cafe. Today we are going to be talking about team styles and body roles and how we can use those more effectively, specifically in team building. And I'll be sharing with you a couple of real small resources, some real brief things, but we really do want to enter into dialogue and have everybody that's on the call today entering in. I'll ask you to please mute your mics if you're not talking, or if you're tapping on your keyboard, so that won't be too disturbing. And if you see that I have muted your mic for you, or if Jay has muted your mic, it's because we're hearing some noise that's dominating things there. We do want to talk about team styles and bodybuilding roles, as I said, and so let me just lead us in a real quick word of prayer, if I might, to get us started. Lord, thank you for this just fantastic opportunity that we have to be visiting together from so many different places and with so many different backgrounds, working with so many different kinds of groups of people. And I pray that today all of our words will be encouraging to one another to build us up as a Grip-Birkman community, so that as coaches, Father, we can be helping others out there in your kingdom to do a better job of understanding one another, understanding themselves, and understanding their teammates, their fellow believers, in such a way, Father, that we can see unity being built in the body as we love one another and as we just encourage one another and build each other up, so that, Father, we can be more fruitful for your kingdom. So help all the words that we say together today to contribute to that purpose, so that you can be glorified. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I'd like for everybody to, if you can remember your team style, your top two team styles preferably. If you can remember that, would you go ahead and type in your top two and your bottom team style, the one that you need the most. And I'd like for us as a group today to use that. We'll do a little bit of a demonstration. Just go ahead and type it in, and it ought to go to everyone. So type yours in, and as we see those coming in, if you're not really sure about yours, that's fine. If you need to go find your information from your summary reports, from your leadership grip summary report. But if you can remember, just type in, please, your top two team styles and your bottom one, your one that you need. And we start seeing those coming in. I'm going to put mine in also so you can see mine. I'm a let's go. And actually, I kind of put it, let's go, let's stay together. I kind of put mine as let's go together. And my bottom one is, oops, I need the, let's be careful. I'll just type in be careful. There we go. So I need to be careful. Good. Just kind of get you thinking about that. Now, as you've got those, thinking about those team styles as you are part of a team. And what I'd like to kind of guide us to do today is, one exercise will be for us to be talking back and forth to each other, particularly if we find someone who has that team style that I need. I want to be able to talk to that person about why I need them. Let me quickly share another screen with you real quick, just to remind us. You ought to be able to see there, get a grip number 6. Supernatural we, your spiritual gifts in a team setting. Remembering that our verse there is 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Just because we have needs does not mean that we are needy. It does mean that we have been built in such a way that we are part of the body, and none of us can function alone. We always need the other people. And our core belief that leads to that is that team styles and bodybuilding roles focus on body life rather than individual assessment. This helps each one of us to discern how we fit into the body rather than simply evaluating our individual strengths. And so many times we find ourselves getting caught up in one-on-one with people, assessing and trying to help them understand their profile, their assessment, their reports. we get so caught up in that we forget that the purpose of this is to try and help them fit into the body, and what is their way of working in the body, their team style, and what is their role, their bodybuilding role, that they play in building up the body. So keeping these things in mind as we're having our discussion, let's talk about how we can help one another perhaps to be better team builders, do a better job of coaching teams through their process. Having said that, let me ask if someone would volunteer to be first to just share, these are my top 2 team styles. And let's start with that. Who would like to go first? And just somebody just kick right in. Don't raise your hand or anything. Just unmute your mic and just speak up. Who would like to talk about your team styles? I didn't prime anybody for this, so I'm going to have to wait for someone to jump in.
I'll do that, Larry.
Thanks, David.
Since I just came out of that session where we talked a bit about this, yeah, my top team style is Let's Go, but my second one is Let Me Help You, and so, you know, if I were to put my statement into a sentence, then I would be a Let's Go person, but it's important for me to know that people are coming along with me, and so I want to have. I don't want to go by myself. I want to have others that are walking, are journeying with me, and in moving forward to our intended destination.
Excellent statement, David. Way to go. So your Let's Go says you really want to get people moving someplace specifically, right? Or
Yes.
you want to see some kind of change in them.
Yes.
Your Let Me Help You says that you want to be alongside them, encouraging them, and as we say here, serving them, building them up, equipping them, right?
Yes.
So your Let's Go, Let Me Help You, how does that play in your team, David? If I could pick on you for just a moment there.
Sure.
How do you see that playing out in your team?
Well, I've got a young woman working with me on staff here who's giving oversight to some of our youth programs, and so, you know, there are a couple of suggestions I made to her to say, okay, how can we fulfill our mission through the youth in our community? And so we talked about that, and so I wanted her to come up with a plan to move forward, but I walked her through it. We talked. We spent, you know, a significant amount of time just coming up with a plan that would move her forward. So there was this idea of, well, let's go for it. It stretched her. There was a lot of risk involved, but it was something. It was there's an international school that's opened up in town, and I suggested that she get in touch with the principal and build some relationship there. So because I felt that would be something that would be really good for us as a church and youth group. So I set before her kind of the let's go and approach this, but let me help you come up with a plan that's going to allow you to be successful.
Very good. You said that your greatest need is, was it Let's Stay Together?
Yeah, I believe that was. I'm not as clear on that and I didn't bring my my profile up, but I'm sure it is Let's Stay Together.
Yeah. So if I could maybe ask Neil, would you mind if I pick on you for a moment, because I think you're a Let's Stay Together as one of your top ones there, right?
I don't care about going with a bunch of people. So go and make it happen.
So is your let's stay together your need, or is it your highest one?
That's my lowest one.
Oh, that was your lowest one. Okay. Shirley, I know that you've got a let's stay together, and that's not your top one, but it's one of your second one. It's your second one, right?
Right.
Could you talk to us a little bit about your let's stay together and your let's stay together? What does it go with?
Let me help you.
So you've got a little bit in common with David there with the let me help you, but your let me help you and let's stay together looks different. Can you talk about how that looks different from his?
To me, he would probably be, when push came to shove, he'd be ready to go if not everyone was on board, and I would be more inclined to say, hey, let's make sure the team's coming with us, or at least the majority. I'm not a stickler for it's got to be everybody or nothing.
Ah, okay. So in your case, you are going to want to help people to understand what the vision is, and let's do it in such a way that we're maintaining the unity of the group, right? All right. What I'd really like to do is to say, Shirley, before I forget that, Shirley, what's your greatest need?
Let's go.
Your let's go. So, all right, we've got you and David together. I wonder if we could get Shirley and David. I did not prep these people for this, but because we know each other pretty well in this group, I hope that you won't feel that I'm imposing on you by asking you guys to act like team right now. If we could get Shirley and David to talk back and forth a little bit about why you need each other.
Well, I need a let's stay together person because in a team setting, because you're right. I can if I get an idea or think we need to be heading in a direction, we need to get going. Before I had all of this many years ago, I remember I had a board member, and I used to present kind of my dream or vision or thought of where we should go, and he used to look at me and he'd say, well, I need some soak time on that one. So that was beneficial for me as I thought about promoting an idea.
So when you look at Shirley, if we were actually going to be team, I would want you, David, to say to Shirley, Shirley, I need you because. Could you come up with some kind of a statement like that for Shirley?
Well, I need you because, Shirley, I need you because I have a tendency to push forward without making sure that everybody is on board. And it's really important to me that the team is together, that we're functioning together. So you're kind of like a second, what's the word I'm looking for? A second voice in the conversation that I need to have.
And you're beneficial to me because I can tend to get stuck down in the details and the planning of it and not move forward when the time is right for that. To think, well, there might be a better idea, or, well, Joe isn't quite with us, so maybe we should wait just a little longer. And sometimes there's a need to definitely push forward or go on, move on from that idea or that project, and wrap that project up. And that's where you are very beneficial, David.
The little challenge for me is to know, to be sensitive to the time that you need, but also, wanting to see us move forward, and that's where I've found the tension over the years. Like, oh, come on, and so that's where I think, establishing good communication and relationship and everything is important. But that's, kind of where I've struggled a bit.
Yeah. Well, I have practice with Let's Goers because I've been with one for almost 40 years. So
I think I know him.
Hey, thank you guys. I think you see how I didn't really have to do much more than So just a little bit of starter fluid on there to get the dialogue started between you two. And you carried the ball excellently well. And not just because you're trained coaches in this, but because you were seeing in each other some real things that you could relate to. And so when we're doing this in a team setting, I think we can all see how the whole purpose of our doing a Grip-Birkman team build is to get a dialogue started. And here's one opportunity for us to do that pretty quickly. Now, granted, these folks already knew about their team styles, and we know that you're going to have to do some teaching with them ahead of time to give them the definitions, but it really doesn't take an awful long time for them to catch that because they've already had that time in doing their assessments to start to become familiar with those terms. Let me ask you right now if any of you would have any questions or comments for the group about ways to use an exercise like this, or another question for you would be, do you have some kind of a best practice in using team styles particularly that you'd like to share with the group? So either a question that you have for the group about how do you do this sort of a thing with any challenges you've come up, or by the way, I found that here is a really good best practice that has worked for me. Either one of those, please.
I had a chance to do this over the weekend with a church planting couple, and I went through the Grip-Birkman, or the grip part, and then I went through the Birkman part, and we had this like almost 2-hour conversation. And when I asked them at the end what stood out for them, they said it was team styles after all that 2 hours. And I think what resonated with them is they were both let's go people, and they realized that that they had a significant need at the on the bottom side. And when I asked them who on their team, their leadership team, filled that role, they could think of someone right away. So it was apparently that was the big insight for them, is that one, they have that need, they could easily overlook that, but within their team they had somebody who could fill that role. So that was an important insight for them.
Excellent. Anyone else?
Let me just jump in here and say, when we were a part of a team in Belgium, and I really wish I would have known what I know now, realized fairly quickly that there were 2 of us on the team out of 3 guys that were let's go guys, and what we needed was a let's be careful. And lo and behold, God had placed with us, the 3rd guy was a let's be careful guy. And so my question that flows out of this is, if you know that's the case, how do you give advice to listen and to watch for the working together of a let's be careful together with a couple of let's go guys? How would you have advised us as a team going into working together?
Let's throw that out to the group. Everybody understand the question, particularly where you've got a let's be careful person, and many times, often you will only have one of those in the team, and you've got a bunch of other let's go or let me help you kind of people. So how do you help them to avoid conflict is one thing, right, Mark?
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. And to make progress.
And to make progress. So any ideas you have to share with Mark about that?
Larry, if I can jump in here, I did a debrief with a staff team, and just not long ago, and they had several people on the team who were let's go people, very gung-ho people. And one of the struggles they're having was that they often made quick decisions, and they tended to jump at new ideas. Because that was the senior pastor in that case, as well as the chairman of the board, were both let's go people. And so in the process of that conversation, one of the guys was a let's be careful guy. And I suggested said to the board, how often do you ask him his opinion before you make a decision? And they said, not very often, because he always holds up our decision. And said, well, you know what? Maybe he's the right person to ask, because there's a somebody here who God is spiritually gifted to say, have we really thought things through? And when we give permission for that, when we recognize that, it opens up the communication door so that the Let's Go people are saying, oh, yeah, we really do need to pay attention, because this is a special gifting God has given him as his primary, let's be careful. And it was interesting just to see how that board then is looking at this guy who they were perceiving as kind of always throwing water on the fire, as actually being someone who was going to actually protect them. That was one way that we actually walked through that to help them value each of these leadership styles, team styles.
Ken, could I ask you, was the let's be careful person part of that conversation when you asked that question? Was he present?
Oh yeah. And he had been silent as we talked about it. He said, I don't open my mouth because I get run over all the time. And so I'm always perceived as being the negative person. And when I come back and said, actually, no, look, based on your mix of spiritual gifts, you're not the negative person, you're the careful person. And sometimes being careful means slowing the process down, which is frustrating to a bunch of Let's Go people. And when we can understand and value that, it changes the dynamics of the group.
So one thing I think we don't want to forget here is that team style is an expression of spiritual gifts.
Exactly.
And when we're operating in our spiritual gifts, which we should be as Christians, well, when we look at the spiritual gifts, there is I'm operating within my gifts, and I'm operating in my gifts, but outside the direction of the Spirit. Does that make sense? So there's the negative consequences. And so when you come across a situation like that, the question is, to me, is, so as you run past this person, are you really operating in the gift of the Spirit, or under your own steam? And same to the person who is the let's be careful, who can be seen as the negative Nelly kind of person. If everybody's operating within the gifts of the Spirit, then they're going to want to listen, and they're going to want to hear and discern what's the Spirit saying to us about this. And I think that's just a really good conversation to have with the group as you're functioning as team. How well do we really function in the leadership and the direction of the Holy Spirit as we meet together? And are we conscious of that? And how could we become more conscious of that?
So Wayne, what I hear you talking about is liabilities.
Right, the liabilities, yeah.
That recognizing that with our team styles, as you say, this is an expression of our gifts, and we do have liabilities in our gifts. We can misuse the gift, can't we?
Right.
And so when we might sometimes come over here and help people to see that, with that let's be careful person, we need you because you have these gifts, and you're going to be leading perhaps alongside sometimes rather than up front. But helping that person understand, you need to express to us your concerns without being critical of others and their ideas. And don't let the outline be our leader, if you will. It's important to us. Don't be so rigid that we can't change. Like we have policies and procedures, but if we're needing to make a whole bunch of exceptions to these policies and procedures, maybe we need to change some of them. But listening to that person at the same time, yes, we recognize they have those liabilities, because that let's go person also has the liability of they may not be listening well, may challenge others inappropriately, or maybe challenging others without having the facts. I know I've been guilty of this many times. And so, when we recognize these liabilities, sometimes in the discussion that we'll have, in the same way that David and Shirley just did for us, I'll say, one of the reasons I need you is because I do have this liability, right?
Right.
Very good.
Larry, I think what Wayne's saying is really important, and it depends upon your perspective and how much you've been trained to discern and listen to the Spirit. I think a way, going back to Mark's original question, this is a way that you could help people be more in tune is to what's going on and what the Spirit may be saying and working through the group. I think we need to have an awareness of when we feel resistance, or when we feel tension, or when we feel irritation. Immediately we say something's wrong with that. I don't agree with that statement, or I don't like that, or they're slowing us down. So we need to train ourselves when we, and this goes back to your question, Mark, when those feelings come up, that we immediately ask, who is speaking? Or maybe, why do I feel this way? And who is speaking? Where are they coming from? And then, what do I need from them? What aspect of what they are, their spiritual gifts, are they bringing that I need to listen to? And so just training. And I think with teams, they need to have that 1-page summary of their gift, their Grip-Birkman for everybody. And so we need to kind of create an awareness. It's not easy to do. Just saying it is not good enough. You have to create an awareness to say, okay, before I jump to conclusions here, I need to go back and look at their team styles. Okay, so where are they coming from? And what is it that maybe I need to be listening to here? And somebody said, I think Neil, is I've worked with teams or led teams where I have come to the conclusion that there's certain people that may not speak up, but I need to invite them to speak up because they're bringing a challenge, or they're bringing a question or a carefulness. So yeah, but I think just teaching ourselves to stop what's going on and think through those questions would be helpful.
Jay, let me ask you a quick question there. How do you get them to share their summary pages with each other? And what format do you do, and how do you get them to share that?
I just, get that 1 page that has the leadership grip triangle, and then the Birkman map and the area of interest. Make copies of it. If they're working on a team, and if they've done a team building with one another, they know this stuff anyway. They've seen it on the wall. I mean, another way you could do it is do the big posters that we all do and keep them. A lot of our guys have them on the back side of our doors. And so, yeah, those are 2 ways that I can do that. Just a file that you've got everybody's 1-page Grip-Birkman summary.
You're talking about the 1-page summary from their leadership grip.
Yeah, that we have them create.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm going to just jump in here and give you a sample on the back of my door.
All right. Speak up again, Mark. I'm sorry, because I inadvertently laughed out loud, and that took the camera off of you. So speak up again.
Well, that's okay. I just wanted to point out what Jay was talking about is my summary is on the back of my door, and
the poster
so
there.
The poster that's that triangle and the grip map, so we can easily place those side by side and see how to be able to compare those. Very simple, very graphic, and easy to understand, except we've got to ask the question, and even as you're speaking, Jay, I'm thinking to myself, how many times do we question someone's motivation instead of questioning their team style?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, their team style is something of their motivation, isn't it? I mean, it's
sure. Where are they coming from?
Yeah, it's where they're coming from.
Well, as long as we don't question their Christianity.
Okay, we don't question their Christianity, or we don't question their credibility.
Right, integrity.
Yeah, or that they're doing this for selfish motives.
Exactly.
And I think this also shows, Larry, that we need to create, when we do a team build, it's good, they're fun. I love to do them. but sometimes I get into where I come in, blow up, and blow out. I come in, have fun, do it, and then I'm gone. And hopefully they're using it, but I don't know. But I think we need to talk to the leader of that team and say, look, you can come back to various areas of this and need to just 15 minutes of a once a month meeting that you have. You could go back and revisit your team styles. You can go back and revisit your map. And we could, there's all kinds of exercise we could create that they could do it for themselves. But you have to help them develop a culture of awareness. And that's where I think we need to do some work in follow-up.
Yeah. I'm making a note of that in here, Jay, that we really do need some kind of follow-up material to help leaders make this a part of their culture.
Another exercise is to literally have them affirm one another within their team style. Using their team style, affirm them in that. Yeah,
talk to us more about that, Shirley, and how you do that in the team build.
I personally haven't done it as the leader, but I've participated with Tim when he has done it, and it's been very effective. I know one group he did it with, it was supposed to be just a quick, go around and do that for one another, and it ended up being a 2-hour time of them affirming one another and encouraging and building up one another. There was a need, obviously, for that, and so thankfully the leader was okay with that and let that continue instead of sticking to the agenda. So, but it can be very, it can help cement the concept of they are different from me, but that doesn't make them wrong. And and it also magnifies the fact that of my need of who has a strength in the group that can help me, as well as me help the group, especially someone like we talked earlier. Well, they just keep their mouth shut because they usually get shot down. It especially helps them to feel like they're more a part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you're helping that team leader to catch hold of that in that kind of a conversation, and if they can keep that dialogue going, I think one of the other keys there, Shirley, that you kind of touched on is that you don't want that leader to be blindsided by these things. Mm-hmm. And Jay, that comes back to some of what you were saying too. All right, we want to do some follow-up coaching with that leader perhaps, but we really want to be sure that we've done some advanced coaching with the leader to make sure that they are very aware of and secure in their own profile so that they're not being blindsided, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes to my mind here that I have to struggle with is that if we stay in the coaching mode more, the more beneficial this is for them. It's easy for us. Ken, for example, gave a good illustration. Is okay, you've got this one that's a let's be careful. So how often do you let him talk or invite his input?
The leader's input.
Yeah. So that was a coaching question. And the more you keep in that coaching mode, oftentimes we'll ask that question, then we'll say, we'll see what you need to do then is you need to talk to him more. You need to invite his, but no, you need to keep them owning that and saying, well, how do you need to access then his wisdom or his involvement? And how can you keep from coming across as always holding them back? And so if they discover the solutions for themselves, it's a lot better than us pointing them out to them.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, another thing there, Jay, I've had leaders that have been so excited they've dominated the dialogue, the conversation. And I've had leaders who, in an effort to not dominate, have sat and been silent, and it's been awfully hard to draw them out. How do we help them to find that right balance?
That's a good question. I'd love to hear somebody answer that.
That was not a rhetorical question, guys. Not one that I intended necessarily to answer first either.
Don't you think that one of the things Shirley just mentioned is the ability to, or the saying, tell us what your report says, and then ask the team to affirm that. It suddenly changes the whole dynamics, even for the person who's feeling shy about it. To be affirmed in that changes the dynamics of that whole process. It doesn't put the shy person out. The let's be careful person who tends to step back maybe. It rather celebrates that in the group. That's one method. I'm not sure it's the best one, but just one.
Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I don't know, Larry. I'm just thinking, but somebody else. Steve, did you unmute and you have a comment? Go ahead.
Well, it's just we just changed places, as Ken knows, and had my first board meeting first part of November, and one of the things that came back from your guys' meeting in, where was it, Indianapolis?
Mm-hmm.
Came back to me through my son was the whole concept of affirmation, and the affirmation thing that you guys did at that conference. And none of the guys here have done anything with Birkman. I don't even know if they know what it is at this point in time. But I took that affirmation part of the first part of the Birkman, and at the beginning of the board meeting, I said to the guys, when we close, I want to do this, and kind of explained it a little bit. And I'm trying to prime the pump to get them thinking along that line and using some of the core things. And I wondered how it was going to go at the end, because don't know them well. And the affirmation part of I kind of pushed it hard that they think of one thing for each person, and kind of did that. And it was just an awesome experience on the board. There were things that were said that you never would have learned any other way. And the one guy that definitely let's be careful, just by watching him, he was almost in tears by the end of that, as people affirmed him what he was doing.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
Yeah, Steve, thank you so much for mentioning that, because we do that in all of our coach training, and we experience the benefit of it, but I don't know that we've embedded it as much into the culture as it really is. In the core culture, leadership, when we have Grip-Birkman celebrations, that's every time we do that. There's just not a time we get together that's not done. But I don't know that that's flowing down. People may look at that as a part of their training and say, oh, that was a nice thing. But it's actually one of the core elements of Grip-Birkman. And so I appreciate you mentioning that. Because it's one way to just create the environment where they speak to one another.
Absolutely.
It's more powerful when they speak to one another than when we speak.
Absolutely. And Wayne, were you unmuting to be able to?
I was just going to say one of the things that if I'm working with a team of usually 6 or more, realizing that people who are more of an introvert don't like to speak out in a large group as well, is vary the exercises, sometimes to have people pair up. And what I've found is, of course, you have to monitor the super extrovert on that so that they don't take the whole time for other person, but you match them up well on that. But sometimes if you give someone who's very much of an introvert, who's very quiet, time to process one-on-one with someone else, and then you bring it back into the group and kind of share in the group. So what did you talk about? What did you hear? What was helpful? A lot of times that's real beneficial, especially to the introvert, more so than the extrovert.
Yeah, another thing that I always do when we're doing in coach training, particularly with the one-on-one practice sessions, we remind them, be sure to affirm your coach at the end of every practice session. What are some things you can do to affirm them as another part of building this in? Then when we're doing team builds, we do the same thing. If we're ever doing one-on-ones leading up to a group session, be sure and affirm the person in what they have said. Then a third thing that we do with the poster exercise, and Mark taking your poster there, many times I have saved the final poster share with the whole group until the very end of the team build, so that we can get their strengths in there as too. And we ask them, share your poster with everyone, and then give us a final statement of what are the strengths that you bring to this team, what are the strengths that you bring to this organization. And they have to make at least one or two statements. Here are my strengths. And then we ask them to sit down and let everyone affirm them. So you present your poster, tell us what your strengths are, and immediately we're going to give you affirmation of that. And it's amazing how the people will say, you said that's your strength, and that is exactly right, and that's why we need you to keep doing what you're doing. And yeah, I too, Steve, have seen people coming to tears there many times, because this is the first time anyone has, in public, in such a way, affirmed who they are. It can be very, very powerful. And then as we're closing out, to say, by the way, guys, you need to keep doing this, keep affirming each other, you know, keep saying those positive words to each other. And it can, as I say, can be very, very powerful.
You talked about the poster quite a bit. And at one time I was having people, draw their own poster like we did in the training.
Yeah.
I also found that some people just didn't engage that very well. They just didn't like to draw or whatever.
Right.
So I think it was actually on a letter size paper, the summary page.
Mm-hmm.
I actually took that and created that into a poster size. And so if anybody's interested in having that, let me know, and I'll be glad to share it. It didn't take a long time to do it. And I know the reports now, the new reports don't have the, couple of the different pieces in it.
Yeah.
Not redone it yet, but I'll be glad just to share that with you. I actually created it on a PowerPoint slide and then saved it as a PDF. And when I'm doing a team build, I actually print it off, put it up on the wall, and as we go through each section, I'll have everybody stop and do their piece, and then we'll talk about it and look at it and debrief around it. So
Wayne, how do you get it printed in poster size?
There's a printing company here that prints it for me. It's like $1.50 or $1.80.
Wow.
They're 24 by 30, I think, 24 wide, 30 inches high. So it's a company here that prints them for, Kinko's was like $5 or $6 each, but this place prints them for like $1.50, $1.80 each.
Fantastic.
So
I did the same thing. Steve Hoke and I were working on doing a team build, and we just put the triangle on top and the map on the bottom, added a few spaces for them to add in some additional information. And I was able to get my local printer to print it out on an 11 by 17, so smaller than what you did, Wayne. And I think you did it for 35 cents. So
yeah.
So
and the benefit of it, though, was that size, after they all filled it in, we were basically able to put them all on a row, and I took pictures of them, and that way I have it, and it fits nicely on a door somewhere, although I don't know where to put them on.
fantastic.
Larry, can I just go back on to your question? I don't know that we really addressed your question about what do you do with a
leader
that's either over-functioning or withdrawing. I don't know, but I just think we need to be confident to address that, kind of coach him in the beginning. How do you normally react? How do you see yourself reacting? How do you want to be during this process? What is your desired position here, and how do you want to operate? And then I think just be bold enough during the process to pull him or her aside to say, man, you're doing exactly what you desired to do. You're engaging appropriately, or you're holding back. What's going on? You're
Yeah.
So just don't be shy about doing that.
That is exactly what I try to do. In fact, like I said, I want to have a coaching session with the leader ahead of time so that he's comfortable with his own profile. And in fact, he might have already been in a team build with the team. If there's a team above him that he's reporting to, then he may have already been in the team build to have observed it. But I want to coach him to say, listen, in the very beginning, you need to set the example for people. And so, please be the very first one to volunteer your own profile, to open up and be vulnerable. And I'm going to promise you, you won't have any blind sides. We're going to make sure that you don't get blindsided with any of your own information. And if you've got other questions you want to ask me aside anytime during the workshop, then pull me aside and you can always ask those. That'll be fine. But then also to tell him, I want you to be you. Be you in the meeting. Be a team member in the meeting. You don't have to play the role of leader in this particular workshop. Just be a member of the team, and it's amazing how your team members are going to respond to that. And for certain profiles, that's kind of hard. But with a little bit of coaching, they can do it, and I always get positive results from that.
Good.
So,
thank you.
Well, guys, we said we we're going to talk about team styles and bodybuilding roles, but we can see how this transfers over also. You can do the exact same thing with bodybuilding roles. And what I'd like to do right now is ask you, and let's zero in on bodybuilding roles with this. What about when we have combinations that seem a little uncommon or they don't seem to match? Now with team styles, that's easy to see, like if we got a let's go, let's be careful, where those styles don't match. And if you want to talk about it in team styles or you want to talk about it in bodybuilding roles, that's fine, either way. But when you see some kind of a combination like that, and you say, that doesn't seem to how do those go together, then how do you handle that?
Larry, while people are thinking and then responding to that, there is a question in the chat for you that you can cover before we end.
Yeah.
How do you cover up front, alongside, or both? How they
Well, yeah, and let's if we don't get to that today, David, then definitely that'll be one for our future conversation. But talk to us just real quickly about the combinations that don't fit, because David's question too, what about, and this really fits to this, what about people that tend to be leading more alongside and not up front? And we have tended sometimes to treat those people as if they shouldn't be leaders, when someone has come and they've said, I've got all supporting gifts, how are we going to handle the fact that here's this person with all supporting gifts, but they actually are the team leader? Are we going to tell them they shouldn't be the team leader?
Larry, if I could just interject here, I just did a team build with the leading board at the church I'm at, and 90% of them had supporting gifts. So
90% of them had supporting gifts.
Yeah, pretty well all of them, as their leadership grip was coming back. It was coming out more and more again that they were having their gifts fell in the supporting area. There were some who had a combination, but basically many of them were had supporting gifts. So that was an interesting dynamic.
Well, were they in leadership roles?
Yes, in fact, the chairman of the board, his gifts were more in supporting kind of role, and a lot of the board members had similar kinds of giftings, gift mix.
I had a team that we were working with where it was a couple that was acting as team leaders on the field, and they both had very strong supporting gifts. They had a team of people who had very strong equipping gifts, But the leaders of the team had all supporting gifts, and their leadership style was alongside, or actually their leadership style many times was from behind, even from behind the scenes. And there was a time when some people would have looked and said, is that really who we want as the leader of this team? But you know what? They were very, very effective leaders because they saw their role as equipping everyone else to be able to do what they were supposed to be doing and pushing those other people out front. And they were behind the scenes making all kinds of things happening, including training or events or any other kind of support things, making sure they had all the logistical support that they needed, and following up with people on details for reports, that sort of thing. They were extremely effective leaders. And all of those people with those equipping gifts were just totally, completely released to be effective in what they were doing. And if we had only looked at their profile, we might have said, that's not who we're going to select for our team leader because they don't have those right kind of gifts. But they were very, very effective leaders. So I think a lot of times we don't need to just look at the profile. We need to ask questions. And in their case, we can ask them, how would you lead this team? What would you do in this case? And if we ask more questions from it rather than assuming things, it's amazing the kinds of things that God does to bring people together.
Well, this cafe today is very, very beneficial for me as I'm doing follow-up now with the teams that were part of this. The other thing that was interesting is that many of the members of the board, their team styles were "let's be careful." So that's that was an interesting dynamic as well. But the conversations that we're having today, I'm making notes here, are very helpful as I think in terms of how to follow up now with this team.
I have permission. I'd had a private chat and asked permission of Paul if I could call on you because, Paul, you are a let's be careful person.
Yes.
And in a place of leadership, you have sat quietly, have listened, have analyzed all of that we've been going on. And I'd like for you to give us some kind of a summary statement from the standpoint of a let's be careful person.
Let me think about that. No. Yeah, so it's good. It's really good. And I like the idea of asking a let's be careful person. And I don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be, but it's not just asking the person, but it's how you do it. Because sometimes up front, people are, let's go people will give us a second to put our input in and we can't give our input in a second. So like if you have a meeting, take a break and then talk to me on a break or something like that would be a lot better way to get my input. But also if I feel, but there have been some situations where I'm engaged and I can't actually interrupt the conversation if I have something, so it's just for me, and maybe it's my combination of how I think because I'm a longer processor, but if I feel respected in general, then I can speak up and say something. If I don't feel respected, you can ask me all day long and I'm not going to tell you what I really think.
So you must feel a little bit respected in this group.
Yeah, I'm good here. This is a good group.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But we've had an opportunity to get to know each other. We've been together in a couple of meetings. We've had web conference calls together. And so it's in your team setting.
Yeah.
But helping us to know once in a while we need to ask for your input. You're not going to just jump in to that where all these let's go kinds of people are going to get so excited about the conversation and we're going to think we're all together and let's take off. And this is what we've left Paul and some of those let's be careful people behind because we didn't get your input.
Right. And if I say something, don't take it that I'm against going forward. I just think we should go forward in a certain way. Because sometimes I've said something and people think I'm against it, but I'm just trying to add something to it. Yeah.
And you have something valuable to add.
Yeah.
We need your input.
Yeah.
So that's
I want to thank you, Paul, for that because that just was very insightful.
Okay, well, that's good.
It shows the value of creating space for people that don't share as much to share because that was really insightful. Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
We don't have time to affirm everybody, but Paul, I want to affirm you. I'd like to invite anybody else in the group, as Jay
Oh, wow.
has right now, to affirm Paul as our example of ways that we would do this. And Paul, you're just going to have to be our
Okay.
token person today, but it's your turn.
All right.
So quickly, before we sign off, let's just affirm Paul if we want. I'll allow for just 3 or 4 people to do it. We won't all try to do it, but I'd like to hear from 3 or 4 of you affirming Paul. Shirley?
Paul, I appreciate the thoughtfulness behind the statements that you make, so that when you make a statement, I know that you really put a lot of thought in it. It's not something just off the top of your head. Like some people, you think, oh, well, he's just talking to hear his head rattle.
Yeah.
You aren't that type. You know,
Thanks.
you're the type that there's a lot of thought that's been put behind what you've said, and so to me, it would carry more weight than maybe someone else.
Thanks.
And Paul, I just want to thank you as well for the statement you made that if I don't feel respected, I will not give my input, no matter how long you wait.
Yeah.
And that whole idea of waiting once, since I'm a let's go kind of guy,
Yeah.
if I ask for input, I'm sort of wanting input right now or a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
And you've reminded me that I may need to step out of the meeting to ask for input. And that is golden.
Okay, good. Thanks.
One more.
Yep. Paul, I'll just really just ditto what the past 2 have just said. Your input today has probably been the highlight for me. Because as a let's go person, you know, I tend to go and not pause and listen. And your comment about, you know, how you ask the question is really helpful. And I mean, I'm just already in my mind with a couple of people. I'm thinking about how do I need to go, you know, when I'm with them next time, how do I need to empower them to really give the wisdom that they have into the whole group. And I think probably many times I disempower people because of that. How you ask is as important as what you ask.
Yeah.
So thanks. It was what you shared today was golden.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Paul, for letting us use you as our example person. But it was more than that. It was real.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you teach us. And if we fail to call on you, you can silently raise your hand. We will.
Yeah. All right. Good.
You have the golden something. You know, there was an old commercial several years ago. You know, E.F. Hutton. When E.F. Hutton speaks and everybody suddenly gets quiet. For you, let's be careful people. That's the case. When you speak, we listen because we know that you have really given it some thought, and we value that. We appreciate that.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
And that's a great place for us to end this Coaches Cafe. I want to remind you that 1 week from today, we'll have a special webinar where we are going to be talking about the changes for people that were not able to be at the celebration particularly. We're going to have, this will be more of a teaching, facilitating session. It will be participatory though. There will be some experiences that we want everyone to join in on. It's going to be a 90-minute webinar starting at this same time, 1 week from today. If you did not receive the email about that, you can contact me or Jay, and we'll get the login information. It won't be the same address. It will be a special login address for that, so that will be a private thing that you can join. That's just to keep it private. It is free. We want all of our coaches to attend that who will, especially those who are not able to be at the celebration. So everybody, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next week or next month for the next Coaches Cafe. God bless you all.